Charles Baxter, in his book Wonderlands, has this great term for a character called a Captain Happen. This is a character who breaks the pattern, who upsets the apple cart, who blurts out dumb things, and who acts on impulse. You need a character like this because the character acts like a spark plug and ignites the rest of the story. Baxter writes that Captain Happens are both a cause of trouble for themselves and also a cause of trouble for others. But I think a lot of writers end up making both their hero and their antagonist make a bunch of really good, smart decisions, like the normal decision that most people make in that circumstance. This video is going to help you make sure that the Captain Happens in your novel are making mistakes, that they're flubbing it up, because that's really going to help you write the story. So let's look at how you can use this in your novel with point number 1. Your Captain Happen should make a terrible decision. Listen, people who make excellent decisions, like all the time, they don't get stories told about them. So I'd encourage you to do this exercise. I want you to count how many times that your hero or antagonist make some sort of mistake or make some sort of bad decision in your novel. If the number's really low, consider, pumping it up a little bit. Consider like throwing something in there that is questionable. And it doesn't have to be for every character, right? Your Captain Happen might just be, one of your side characters, one of your minor characters. So for an example of this, let's look at Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl, specifically Nick Dunn and his terrible decision to have an affair. Here's the thing though, he doesn't just cheat on his wife, he cheats on his wife with one of his students, right? He's a college professor. 2, it's even worse than this because he uses his wife's trust fund to fund the affair, like to buy hotels and stuff. Jeez. And 3, he conducts this affair in a pretty small town where, he's pretty much guaranteed to get recognized, so he has like 0 discretion. But guess what? Without that terrible, awful decision, we don't have a book. We don't have a story. Amy has no motivation to get revenge on him. But there's one thing you absolutely should know if you're trying to write a good Captain Happen, and it's number 2, create a one-way gate. So it's really great if your Captain Happen makes a terrible decision that they can't undo or reverse in some way, right? They do it and it's like, cat's out of the bag. Okay, gotta go forward from here. Look at Perfume by Patrick Zuskind. This is a book where a man with a crazy accurate sense of smell ends up smelling this gorgeous scent. It leads him to this young woman, and because he wants to possess this smell, he ends up killing her. Now, that's a decision that our character makes that you can't come back from, right? You can't play like Uno reverse card and be like, I am now not a murderer.
I am not a murderer.
No, now you're a murderer forever. So what that does is it makes sure the story has to progress from there and deal with that changed circumstance. It's a one-way gate. Now, you might be saying like, does my character have to make a terrible decision? Like, how terrible does it have to be? So let me just qualify that for point number 3 and say that maybe it's not terrible, it's just different. I think what's really key is that a Captain Happen has to do something that other people are not doing, right? It's something different which causes problems or causes a ruckus. Great example of this would be in Men in Black, the very first one, where Will Smith is taking a test. They're trying to figure out who's going to be Tommy Lee Jones' new partner. And they're all sitting in these really cramped cubicles. And what Will Smith does is he goes over and like pulls this table over and it's screechingly loud. Now, everyone else is like super annoyed by him that he would like dare to do this. But what the test takers see is like, oh, this is someone who thinks like outside the box, who isn't afraid to make a scene. There's also this moment where they have a shooting test and all the other military men shoot all the aliens, right? And Will Smith, he shoots a little girl because he's suspicious of her because she's carrying all these like crazy advanced books and she's out late at night. So are either of these things technically mistakes? Well, no, but they're definitely like, they seem to mistakes to all the other people who are testing with him. Hey, we learn about 1,000 other techniques just like Captain Happen in Bookfox Lab. If you sign up today, you get access to all my courses and all my recorded material, as well as an ebook called The Fiction Writer's Toolkit that's only available to lab members. As always, the link is in the description. Check it out and we'd be happy to give you those bonuses. The 4th thing you need to know to use a Captain Happen well in your book is that A Captain Happen might just use dialogue. So Captain Happens don't always have to do something to incite the action. Sometimes they just say something. And my recommendation is to go scene by scene in your book, thinking of, okay, who is a truth teller in this scene? Who is not going to hold back and is going to say exactly what they think, even though it might be like the worst thing to say ever. So the phrase, "he's just not that into you," originates from a 2003 episode of Sex and the City, where there's a character, Jack Berger, who's played by Ron Livingston, and he says this line to Miranda like, you know what, he's just not that into you. And all the women are like horrified, like, how could you possibly say that? And he's like, listen, if he was into you, like, he would have closed. Now, without that truth teller, you don't have a scene, right? The women keep on giving nice platitudes to each other. They keep on trying to console Miranda. But when he says that, it's like, oh, now we have conflict. Now we have something to wrestle with. Another technique you can use is ask yourself, what is everyone thinking in this scene, but everyone but one refuses to say it? There is a classic short story by the great writer Flannery O'Connor called A Good Man is Hard to Find. And this family with a grandmother has crashed their car in the woods, and they get approached by these three men, and the grandmother blurts out, "Why, I recognize you. You're the outlaw called the Misfit that just escaped from prison." And the husband's like, "Oh, why did you have to say that?" Because obviously they have to kill them now because they've been recognized. But you know, the grandma, she is definitely a Captain Happen. Everything that happens in that story, she is the one responsible for. She gets them out of the house. She makes them crash the car. She's the one responsible for the misfit killing them all. Now, I know what your objection might be, and I'm going to address it in point number 5. Doesn't that make this character unlikable? Now, some people might worry that a Captain Happen will be unlikable, especially if they are your protagonist or your hero. They're making terrible decisions, and therefore the reader's not going to relate to them or be like, why are you doing that? Now, I have 2 responses to that. One is that an unlikable character can still be great. Walter Mosley wrote the Easy Rawlins novels, and the first one is Devil in a Blue Dress. Now, Easy is the main character, but he also has this sort of sidekick friend character called Mouse. Now, Mouse is a murderous little fellow, right? Like, not a likable character at all, but the man makes stuff happen, right? When he enters a scene, you know, oh, stuff's going down. Mouse is here. It's an example of a minor character who almost overshadows the main character because they fulfill the role of a Captain Happen inside the story. But my second point along this note would be that making bad decisions doesn't necessarily make your character unlikable. Sometimes we understand, because we sympathize with the character, why they're making that wrong decision. For instance, like Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games. Remember in the first book where she's being tested before the games, and all the game makers are just ignoring her, right? They're chatting with each other, they're eating food. So what does she do? She shoots the apple out of the pig's mouth, right next to them. I mean, a foot in either direction, and she shoots one of them. Now, on the surface, this seems like a bad decision. I mean, Effie Trinket shouts at her, right? Her entire life is in these people's hands, so she doesn't want to anger them. But, I mean, we sympathize with her because, like, why were they ignoring her? Like, she's like, hey, listen, pay attention to me. She got their attention, and she also got highly rated because of that blustery attitude. Hey, if you're tired of writing advice that you feel like you've heard of 1,000 different times, then please subscribe to this channel. I really try to keep it fresh and original and new to help you write the best book you can possibly write. And also, you know, like the video if you found that this particular video has helped you along the journey. Now, here's the next question for you. Who should your Captain Happen be? And that brings us to point number 6, which is your Captain Happen isn't always your protagonist. And the reason for this is that sometimes you have a lot more latitude when working with a minor character to have them do wild and crazy and odd things. The reader doesn't have to be in the brain with this person, right? So your protagonist can be a much more normal person, and then your Captain Happen can be this, you know, psychopath from over here coming in and like stirring the pot up. So let's look at Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch. Now, our main character is called Theo, but the minor character is a character called Boris, and Boris is definitely the Captain Happen. In Vegas, Boris initiates the drinking and the drugs and the shoplifting, and he's also the guy that steals the painting from Theo, which sort of sets the whole storyline in motion. Now, the book doesn't happen without Boris inciting all of these incidents. Theo's almost just along for the ride. So let's look at Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, specifically at Pippin. Pippin, that fool of a took who admittedly admittedly is sort of like a more minor member of the whole Company of the Ring. In the book, he tosses a small stone down a well, just out of curiosity, to see how far it goes down. And in the movie, he accidentally touches a dwarf's skeleton, which falls down the well and clatters and makes this huge sound. So the book makes him a little bit more unlikable, right? Because he deliberately chose the wrong action. The movie makes him a little bit more likable because, it was just an accident. But my point is, the Captain Happen in this scene, it's not Frodo, it's not Gandalf, it's not Legolas even, it's Pippin who causes the Balrog and all the enemies to come after them. So the next thing we're going to do is look at an exception to the whole principle of Captain Happen, and that brings us to number 7, which is the negative Captain Happen. So this is an example of a Captain Happen who doesn't do things actively or say things actively to make things happen, but sort of refuses to do something. It's action by inaction. Let's look at Han Kang's The Vegetarian. So in this book, the main character, all she does is she stops eating meat, right? And it just disrupts everyone. I mean, it just throws a wrench into absolutely every single part of the story. That's all she does. It's not even a big thing. But that lack of doing something, or that inaction, or that refusal to do something can be just as much of an incitement to your storyline as a character actually doing something. So look for places in your book where a character might go on a hunger strike, or a character might just refuse to obey orders, or something where they're just not doing something instead of doing something. So I think you guys are going to have this question, so let me address it here rather than in the comments. How many Captain Happen moments do you need in a book? So to answer that, I'd say point number 8. Some Captain Happens fire exactly once. So in this storyline, one singular Captain Happen act launches the whole rest of the storyline. Think of Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. Moss takes the money, right? And just that one act, okay, the whole story is off to the races after that. Or in The Human Stain by Philip Roth, that professor utters one word towards some missing students. He uses the word spook. And from there, the whole story blows up and he loses his job and everything collapses. On the other hand, I do think there are some examples of Captain Happens that happen continuously throughout the story. Like they keep on doing things in, every other scene. And that's what really fuels the storyline. Look at Harry Potter and good old Neville Longbottom. First, he breaks his wrist during a flying lesson. Then he loses the house points when Professor McGonagall finds him out of bed talking to Hermione and Harry. In potions, he melts a cauldron and spills it all over himself. And he also loses the password list, which enables Sirius's break-in. And that's only a small representation of what good old Neville does, right? I mean, he is the Captain Happen in so many of the Harry Potter books. He does stuff and ruins everything. But let me point out, without those sort of events, then you don't have a story, right? So he's a very, very, very essential character for the whole plot. But Neville is a really important character because I think he leads us to the most common mistake that writers make when they're trying to create Captain Happens, which is number 9. Not allowing for character change. So your Captain Happen doesn't have to keep on making mistakes and choosing badly throughout your entire novel, right? No, they can evolve, they can grow up, they can change. Quick example with Neville Longbottom, after say book 3 or book 4, somewhere around there, he stops making so many mistakes, right? And at the very end of the story, he actually has a very heroic role to play. A heroic role which is more surprising because we saw over multiple books what a flub up he is, right? So we see that character change and it's really rewarding to the reader. And same thing in The Goldfinch, right? Boris ends up evolving and making up for a lot of his earlier mistakes. He sort of saves the day at the end of The Goldfinch and sets everything right. So I'd encourage you not to think about this as domesticating your Captain Happen. It's more like showing that they can evolve and they can change as people and make better decisions. Hey, don't forget that Bookfox Academy will help you write your book and help you publish your book. I've got so many videos that guide you along that process. So once again, link is in the description. And hey, I hope this video spawns a million Captain Happens out there that end up creating wonderful storylines for your book and give you so many opportunities to deal with their terrible decisions and make storytelling magic.